incorporate music with your storytelling.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to do that?
It's kind of fun. It mixes it up a little bit, and folks tend to enjoy it. And I think music and story goes together too in some areas.
How long have you been telling stories?
Gosh, 30 plus years or so. Of course, my mom will tell you it's been since I was a little boy.
Did other people in your family tell stories? Is that where you picked it up? Or
I picked up a little bit of that from my family, aunts, uncles, grandmothers, mother, but a lot of it I just developed over time. Grandma used to tell me about music in the mountains. She said they didn't have a whole lot of music in the mountains. People would sit around and sing ballads and things like that. Maybe somebody might have had a fiddle or something. And if they did have a dance, they didn't have a big band, they might have a fiddle player and somebody played a washboard or something like that. And a banjo would have been an obscure instrument, but there were banjos up there. The banjo did not come from the mountains. It's an African instrument. It probably started or began to show up in the mountains shortly after the Civil War times.
why do you spend your time telling stories to other folks now?
I enjoy storytelling. I just enjoy interacting, and it's a conversation between me and the audience. So I get that energy, that feed from the audience.
I trained at the Peabody Conservatory of Music in vocal performance, and thought I wanted to be in opera because I thought that was a combination of theater and music, and I didn't realize it was a combination of foreign languages and music, so didn't get along real great with the foreign languages part, so then I moved into musical comedy, and from there into comedy, and then I began writing, and then I was taken to my very first storytelling festival, and I watched the people get up and perform, and I thought, that's me, that's my home, because I can write and I can act and I can sing. And I've been very happy doing it ever since.
Why do you think keeping these kind of stories alive is important?
Oh, because stories are our most innate language.
Well, we were kind of like the West Virginia Von Trapps from The Sound of Music, you know? I was always a soprano. My little sister just kind of fit in there somewhere. My dad was an amazing Welsh tenor, and my mother was a lovely alto. And so we would sing in 4-part harmony, which was grand. Now, my mother's favorite song was the riddle song. I gave my love a cherry that had no stone. I gave my love a chicken without a bone. I gave my love a baby, what's now crying. And I told my love a story that had no end.
Stories are how we have taught our children since we were around fires in the beginning of time. Stories, as we enter a post-literate age, which I'm convinced we're entering, stories are very powerful ways of teaching everyone, not just children. Because rather than having some sort of main point or being preached at or some sort of rhetoric, stories allow you to walk around inside somebody else's life and see what happens to them. So I think it's one of the most powerful mediums there is. In fact, the longer I do it, the more powerful it becomes.
I probably have always had an ear for it because I've loved stories. I love to read. So I was that really shy kid who lived in books, and I loved the stories, and I couldn't always tell what was real and what was. As far as I was concerned, if a fairy popped up in my living room, why wouldn't they? But I didn't begin telling stories until I got married. My husband's a writer, and he had written a book about Gullah culture, and he would go on the book signing things, and people would say, tell a story from the book. And then he was like, hey, you want to help me? You want to do this? And so he took the whole book and turned it into like an oral, because it was a collection of oral histories. And we just started telling the stories, and it felt right. And I've been doing it now for over 35 years.
Wow, sing that sweetest good song. Yeah. Oh, Jenny's my red sweet, sweet, sweet. He's so sweet, sweet, sweet.
Now, is that what developed into the TV program?
In a way, we had been doing this storytelling for some time when we met someone who was working for Nickelodeon to make stories and said, hey, maybe we can do a show about you. It was really just serendipity. We weren't looking for it. We weren't expecting it. She heard that we did children's stories. I had a toddler at the time. I was pregnant with the second one. She thought that would be in there. That's how it happened.
Hello, 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 everybody. That means hola, 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 everyone. That means shabba, shabba, hello, everybody. That means hello, 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 everyone.
What's next? You got any other big plans? Or?
Well, I'm a visual artist, so I'm preparing for a pretty good solo show coming up, and I am painting maniacally. I am doing some facilitation, which I really love, around the issue of knowing each other's stories and social justice and what it means to listen and hear another's story, how we recognize the humanity in others, and I do most of that with adults. But I work it in, even when I'm doing kids, I work it in all the time.
I was in the 3rd grade at Lyman Elementary, and Nancy Roberts came and did her presentation to our class. Well, and then she said, in my books you can see pictures of the ghost, and I was like, for an 8-year-old, that was candy. Hooked me right then. Fast forward about 25 years, my wife teaches 3rd grade, is having a Halloween party, and needs help. And I'm like, I can do that. And then she says, entertain the kids while I make punch. And I'm like, I don't sing, I don't dance, but I know some ghost stories, so I'll tell those. And it went from being her class to all of her colleague classes to the entire school. And then she said, you know, and I fussed about how bad the ghost story books were that I was buying, how they all had the same stories. And she said to write a book, and here we are. Over in Iowa, if you are into healthful living and exercise, they can walk around the city cemetery. Especially right around this time of night, right before it gets dark. You may get lucky enough to see an elderly gentleman following you. But don't speak to him. Because if you speak to him, he's prone to kind of vanish into nothingness. So if you are lucky enough to be accompanied one of you young ladies, just walk on by, he'll leave you alone. But if you say, hey, leave me alone, you'll get scared out of your shoes. Which makes walking kind of hard. I've never really been scared of a ghost, but the thing that scares me is, A, who else I am with, because you never know how someone else will react, and the environment, because most of the time you don't find these things in the 2018 brand new finished building. It's always the 1840s house, the abandoned hospital with the rotten floorboards and the crumbling linoleum. You've got rats, you've got mice, you've got asbestos hanging in strips, so that scares me more than any actual ghost. By and large, in my experience, ghosts are largely almost tape recordings of the past, because most of the time they'll pass by and it's like a tape that degrades, and I know you being in media know about that. You videotape a football game from 1987, it's crystal clear and it's really nice when you first watch it. As you play it over and over, it gets staticky, you lose picture, eventually you have the soundtrack, and then that fades out. And the way I look at it is, most of these, the videotape of time has worn thin. You know, 100 years ago I would have seen you walk through the front door. 50 years ago I would have seen the front door open and close. Now I hear the click of the door closing. And in 25 years there may not be anything left. But by and large, most ghosts don't interact with the living. By and large. I mean, I can't spoil anything else.
How many experiences have you had with apparitions or ghosts? Do you have a general idea?
I've been lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it. I've probably had better than a dozen, probably more. And I'm not particularly psychic or anything. I think, and most of the time something happens, I'm not actively investigating or looking. It's just, I'll come around the corner and, what was that? Or, did you hear somebody say whatever? And it's like, well, now that I'm here, let me look around and see what I can find, because most people run screaming to the car, and I'm the guy in the haunted house movie that goes wandering upstairs in the attic where the monster is. So yeah,